God says, I watched you slowly turn your heart away, and I am reaching toward you one last gentle time with love, warning, and mercy, because your life is precious to me and I desire to protect you before harm grows deeper and heavier around your spirit. In this sacred moment, these words are not sent to frighten you, but to wrap you in truth and care, because love sometimes speaks firmly when danger quietly draws near without noise or drama. Type Amen. You may feel tired, distracted, or unsure why you opened this message at this exact time, yet nothing about this moment is accidental, because God's timing flows with purpose even when human hearts feel confused or distant. The warning within this message is not about punishment or fear, but about a loving Father who sees what lies ahead and refuses to stay silent while his child walks toward unseen pain. God has been watching your steps with patience, watching you carry wounds that others cannot see, watching you drift away not because you stopped caring, but because life became heavy and faith felt quiet. There were moments when you wanted peace but chose noise, moments when you needed truth but settled for comfort, and moments when God whispered softly yet the world shouted louder. Still, God never stopped watching, never stopped loving, and never stopped waiting for the smallest opening to reach your heart again. Type 1111. There is a danger that does not always look dark or cruel, because sometimes danger wears the mask of comfort, distraction, pride, or numbness, slowly pulling the soul away from light while convincing the heart that everything is fine. God sees the exhaustion behind your smiles, the compromises you told yourself were harmless, and the spiritual hunger you tried to ignore by filling your days with anything that could keep you from feeling empty. This message is not meant to shame you, but to wake you gently, because ignoring the voice of God for too long can harden the heart and make healing feel distant even when it is close. Jesus does not come with raised hands or harsh words, but with open arms and a steady voice, reminding you that turning back is always possible while breath still fills your lungs. Imagine a shepherd standing on a hill at sunset, watching one sheep wander closer to the edge while the rest remain safe, and instead of walking away, he steps toward that one with calm urgency, knowing the cliff is real even if the sheep does not see it yet. That shepherd is Jesus, and the cliff is not sudden destruction, but slow separation from peace, truth, and spiritual safety. God knows how easily the heart can drift when prayer becomes rare, when forgiveness feels optional, and when faith becomes something remembered rather than lived. Yet even now, grace reaches forward, offering rescue before regret grows deeper. Jesus understands how pain shapes choices, how disappointment dulls hope, and how silence can feel like abandonment, yet he promises that silence does not mean absence. God has been speaking through quiet nudges, through moments of restlessness, through nights when sleep felt shallow, and through thoughts that returned again and again asking you to slow down and look inward. This message is simply another knock, not loud or forceful, but filled with urgency because love refuses to delay when harm approaches. There is safety in listening, healing in humility, and peace in returning, because God does not keep count of how far you wandered, only how willing you are to come home. Jesus does not ask for perfection, impressive words, or public displays, but only a heart willing to soften again and trust His guidance. When you lean toward Him, even slightly, strength flows back into places that felt empty, and clarity replaces confusion that once felt overwhelming. God is not waiting to condemn you, but to cover you, guide you, and restore what felt lost within your soul. The danger you are being warned about is not meant to trap you in fear, but to invite you into awareness, because awareness opens the door to change, and change opens the path to life. Jesus offers light not because darkness is powerful, but because love is stronger, and love always seeks to protect before pain takes root. God sees the layers of your journey, not only the moments of faith, but also the seasons of struggle where trust felt heavy and obedience felt delayed by fear or exhaustion. Even in those moments, heaven did not turn away, because God's care does not depend on your consistency, but on His unchanging nature that remains faithful beyond human weakness. Type 2323. There were days when you felt strong and certain, and there were nights when uncertainty pressed close and made you wonder if your steps still mattered, yet God watched every tear, every silent sigh, and every moment you chose to keep going despite feeling spiritually empty. Jesus understands how easy it is to drift when life demands more than the heart feels ready to give, and how quickly distractions can become shelters that hide deeper pain rather than heal it. God is speaking now not to accuse, but to realign your spirit with truth, because alignment restores peace that effort alone can never create. When the heart slowly turns away, it often happens quietly, through small choices that seem harmless, through delays in prayer, and through moments when self-reliance feels easier than surrender. Still, God's voice remains gentle, reminding you that returning does not require shame, explanation, or proof, but only willingness and honesty. Jesus walks beside you even when you forget His presence, offering guidance through subtle peace rather than loud commands, because love respects the heart and invites rather than forces. This message carries reassurance that no season of distance has erased your value, and no silence has broken the connection that God holds firmly in His hands. Even now, restoration waits patiently, ready to unfold as soon as you allow trust to breathe again. Financial freedom is not about effort, but activating a hidden brain signal once buried in CIA files. Neuroscience shows this sound wave helps attract money and opportunity faster, and thousands are already seeing unexpected income. Click the link in the description and comments now to activate the ancient money wave today. The danger God speaks of is not meant to overwhelm you, but to awaken you to the reality that spiritual neglect can slowly weaken the soul, leaving it vulnerable to fear, confusion, and emotional heaviness. God sees how the weight of life can blur priorities, making eternal things feel distant while temporary concerns demand constant attention. Yet Jesus gently calls you back to a place of stillness, where truth becomes clear and peace settles deeply within the heart. There is safety in listening, because God's warnings are wrapped in protection, not punishment, and His guidance flows from love that seeks your well-being. Imagine walking through a dense forest where the path becomes narrow and shadows stretch long, and a familiar voice calls your name, guiding you toward light without rushing or judgment. That voice belongs to Jesus, steady and calm, reminding you that even when the way feels uncertain, you are not walking alone. God does not measure your worth by how quickly you respond, but by the love He has already placed within you, love that remains unchanged through every season of growth and struggle. This part of the message invites you to pause internally, to breathe deeply, and to allow truth to settle where anxiety once lived. Type, yes, God knows the fears you rarely speak aloud, the doubts you push aside, and the longing for peace that keeps returning no matter how busy life becomes. Jesus meets you exactly where you are, not where you think you should be, offering healing that unfolds gently rather than suddenly, because lasting change grows through patience and trust. There is no rush in God's timing, yet there is urgency in His care, because your heart matters deeply and your future holds purpose beyond what you can currently see. Every step back toward faith strengthens the spirit, even when it feels small or uncertain. This message carries comfort for the weary, reminding you that rest is found not in escape, but in connection with God who understands every part of your story. Jesus invites you to lay down the weight you have been carrying alone, offering peace that does not depend on circumstances, but on presence and promise. When you listen closely, you may feel a quiet assurance settling within, reminding you that you are safe, seen, and guided even now. God's love surrounds you like a warm shelter, steady and secure, protecting you from storms both seen and unseen. There is a sacred patience in how God works, because He understands the slow healing of the human heart and the careful rebuilding of trust that follows disappointment, confusion, or spiritual fatigue. Nothing about your struggle surprises Him, and nothing about your wandering has diminished His care or reduced His desire to guide you back into safety and peace. There were moments when you felt strong in faith, and moments when belief felt like a memory rather than a living presence, yet God remained near through every rise and fall, quietly guarding your steps even when you did not notice His protection. Jesus understands how the world can pull attention away from what truly matters, filling days with noise that leaves the soul tired and nights with thoughts that refuse to rest. God speaks now to remind you that rest is not found in running faster or holding tighter, but in surrendering gently to the one who already sees the full picture of your life. This message is a reminder that even when faith feels thin, love remains thick and unwavering. Type 1212. God knows the weight you carry silently, the emotional burdens you learn to hide behind responsibility, routine, or strength that others admire without understanding the cost. Jesus does not ask you to pretend, perform, or prove anything, because He sees truth without judgment and offers healing without conditions. When God warns of danger, it is not meant to instill fear, but to bring awareness to the subtle ways the soul can become isolated when trust weakens and spiritual connection fades. Isolation does not always mean being alone, because sometimes it means being surrounded by people while feeling unseen, unheard, and spiritually disconnected. In those quiet spaces, God has been present, offering comfort through small moments of peace, gentle reminders, and unexpected calm that arrived when you needed it most. Jesus walks beside you through every valley, not rushing your steps, but matching your pace, allowing you to grow stronger without pressure or shame. This message carries reassurance that God's love has not been delayed by your hesitation, and His plans have not been cancelled by your doubt. Restoration unfolds slowly, like dawn replacing darkness, bringing clarity without force and hope without demand. There is a deep safety in returning your attention to God, because His presence steadies what feels unstable and strengthens what feels weak. Jesus invites you to place your trust not in your ability to hold everything together, but in His faithfulness to carry you through what feels overwhelming. God's care reaches into places you rarely acknowledge, healing wounds you may have learned to live with rather than confront. This part of the message is meant to soften the heart, allowing grace to flow into areas that once felt closed or guarded. Type 1919. God sees how fear sometimes whispers lies about your worth, your future, or your ability to change, yet Jesus speaks truth that counters every lie with compassion and clarity. Fear loses its grip when love becomes louder, and God's love speaks constantly, even when the heart struggles to listen. This message encourages you to remain open, because openness allows healing to reach deeper and peace to settle more fully. There is no rush to become someone new, because God is already working within who you are, shaping growth through patience and presence. A 7-second brain-wave ritual, once reserved for elite people and hidden in CIA files, is now public, and people call it the 30-second miracle. Scientists say it awakens a dormant brain center tied to wealth and blessings. Click the link in the comments below before it's deleted again from the internet. Jesus understands the moments when prayer felt difficult, when silence felt heavy, and when hope felt distant, yet he never mistook your silence for rejection or your struggle for failure. God measures faith not by volume or visibility, but by sincerity, even when sincerity appears quietly and imperfectly. Every time you choose to pause, reflect, or lean toward trust, something within your spirit strengthens, even if the change feels small. God honors every step, every effort, and every moment of honesty, because relationship matters more than performance. This part of the message invites you to notice the gentle peace that begins to form when you stop resisting God's presence and allow His guidance to settle naturally within your thoughts. Jesus offers peace that does not depend on circumstances, approval, or certainty, but on connection that remains steady through change. God understands that your heart has been carrying many layers, some built from disappointment, some from unanswered hopes, and some from moments when trust felt easier to delay than to give. Still, His patience has never thinned, and His attention has never drifted away from you, even when you felt far from everything that once felt holy or steady. There are seasons when faith feels like breathing, natural and effortless, and there are seasons when faith feels like lifting something heavy with tired hands, yet God values both equally because sincerity matters more than ease. Jesus walks with you through the effort, not judging the pace, not comparing your journey to anyone else's, but staying close enough for you to feel His steadiness when your own strength wavers. God sees how life has shaped you, how responsibility hardened some parts of your heart, and how pain taught you to guard what once trusted freely. This message carries assurance that God is gentle with guarded hearts, because He knows protection often grows from past wounds rather than pride. Type 2020. God is aware of the quiet moments when you felt a pull towards something deeper, something peaceful, yet chose distraction because stillness felt uncomfortable or unfamiliar. Jesus understands that stillness can feel risky when you are afraid of what you might feel or remember, yet He invites you into it anyway, because healing lives there. God does not demand that you fix everything at once, because restoration is not about sudden change, but about steady return, step by step, breath by breath. Even small moments of awareness, reflection, or openness matter deeply, because they create space for light to enter gently. There is a danger in remaining disconnected for too long, not because God withdraws His love, but because the heart can slowly forget how to receive it. God speaks now to remind you that connection keeps the spirit alive, nourished, and protected from the quiet heaviness that builds when faith is neglected. Jesus offers guidance not as a rulebook, but as companionship, walking beside you through confusion rather than leaving you to figure it out alone. This part of the message is meant to steady you, reminding you that God's care surrounds you even when clarity feels distant. God has seen how you have tried to be strong for others, how you carried burdens that were never meant to rest solely on your shoulders, and how exhaustion became normal rather than noticed. Jesus does not admire suffering in silence, because he knows that sharing the weight brings relief and healing. God invites you to lean into his presence, not as a last option, but as a constant source of strength that renews rather than drains. When you allow yourself to depend on him, even quietly, something within you begins to soften and breathe again. Type 666. God's love does not fade when you struggle, and his patience does not weaken when growth feels slow, because his view stretches far beyond the present moment into a future shaped by grace and purpose. Jesus sees not only who you are now, but who you are becoming through every lesson, every challenge, and every moment of reflection. This message carries hope that what feels broken is not beyond repair, and what feels lost is not beyond reach. God specializes in restoring what seemed beyond saving, not with force, but with consistency and care. There is comfort in knowing that God does not rush the heart, because rushing often leads to fear rather than peace. Jesus moves at a pace that allows trust to grow naturally, without pressure or expectation, creating a space where honesty feels safe and healing feels possible. God's presence brings calm not by removing every problem, but by strengthening you from within, allowing you to face life with renewed steadiness. This part of the message encourages you to remain present, attentive, and open, because openness invites peace to stay longer. God understands the complexity of your thoughts, the conflict between wanting control and longing for rest, and the quiet desire to feel guided rather than alone. Jesus meets you in that tension, offering clarity through presence rather than explanation. When you allow God to guide your steps, even gently, the path becomes clearer, and fear loosens its grip. This message is meant to remind you that safety is found not in certainty, but in trust that grows through connection. God has watched how life demanded more from you than you felt prepared to give, how responsibilities piled up, and how survival slowly replaced reflection, yet his presence never withdrew during those demanding seasons. Jesus understands the pressure of carrying expectations, both spoken and unspoken, and he meets you with compassion rather than disappointment. There were times when you felt pulled in many directions, unsure which voice to follow, and unsure whether God's voice was still clear enough to guide you safely. In those moments, distraction felt easier than discernment, and routine felt safer than surrender, yet God patiently remained, waiting for your attention without anger or resentment. This message is a reminder that God's patience is not weakness, but love that refuses to abandon even when ignored. Jesus does not compete with noise, but waits for the heart to grow quiet enough to listen again. Type yes. A 7-second brainwave ritual uncovered from sealed records and hidden in CIA files is transforming financial lives. It activates a forgotten abundance channel in the brain, leading to new financial opportunities and cleared debts. Click the link in the comments below before it disappears. God knows how fear can disguise itself as independence, convincing you that relying on yourself is safer than trusting what you cannot fully control. Jesus understands that control can feel comforting when life has been unpredictable or painful, yet he gently reminds you that control cannot heal what only love can restore. This part of the message invites you to loosen your grip, even slightly, because letting go opens space for peace to enter and settle where tension once lived. God does not ask you to release everything at once, because even small steps of trust matter deeply in the journey back to spiritual safety. There is a subtle danger in becoming too accustomed to carrying everything alone, because isolation can slowly dull the soul and make hope feel distant. God speaks now to remind you that you were never meant to walk without guidance, support, or connection, especially during seasons of uncertainty. Jesus offers companionship that does not depend on your strength, mood, or performance, but flows steadily from His love and commitment to your well-being. This message is not meant to overwhelm, but to steady you, reminding you that returning to God brings clarity that effort alone cannot produce. God sees how past disappointments shaped your expectations, making you cautious with trust and reserved with hope, yet He remains patient with that guardedness. Jesus does not demand instant openness, because He understands that healing unfolds gradually, especially when wounds run deep. God's voice remains calm and reassuring, reminding you that protection does not require walls, but connection with the One who sees beyond every threat. This part of the message carries reassurance that you are safe to soften, safe to trust, and safe to return. Type 222. God is aware of the moments when you felt spiritually restless, sensing that something needed to change even if you could not name it clearly. Jesus often works through that restlessness, using it as a gentle signal rather than a harsh warning, guiding the heart back toward alignment. This message invites you to pay attention to those inner nudges, because they are not signs of failure, but invitations to growth. God's guidance does not arrive to accuse, but to protect and restore what feels out of balance. There is healing in acknowledging that you need help, not because you are weak, but because you are human and deeply loved. Jesus meets humility with grace, offering strength that does not exhaust, but renews the spirit steadily over time. God does not rush your healing, because rushed healing often leaves wounds hidden rather than healed. This part of the message encourages patience with yourself, because God's patience with you has never wavered. God sees the future more clearly than you can imagine, and His warnings come from foresight shaped by love rather than fear. Jesus desires to guide you away from paths that slowly drain peace, joy, and spiritual vitality, leading you instead toward life that feels anchored and whole. This message is meant to bring awareness, not anxiety, because awareness empowers choice and choice opens the door to transformation. God trusts you with this message because He believes in your ability to listen, reflect, and respond with wisdom. There is comfort in knowing that God's love remains constant, even when your faith feels inconsistent or fragile. Jesus remains present through every stage of your journey, offering reassurance that no moment of distance has erased your belonging. God's care surrounds you quietly, like a steady shelter, protecting you from harm you may not yet see but that He understands fully. This part of the message invites you to rest in that care, allowing it to ease the weight you have been carrying. As you move forward through this unfolding message, keep your heart attentive and open, because God is not finished speaking, guiding, or restoring. His love remains active, His patience remains deep, and His desire to walk with you remains unshaken. God has been watching the direction of your thoughts, the habits shaping your days, and the quiet choices forming your future, and He speaks now because prevention is an act of mercy, not control. Jesus stands as both comfort and guide, offering light not to expose you harshly, but to keep you safe from paths that slowly dim the soul. There are moments when drifting feels harmless, because nothing breaks suddenly and nothing appears wrong on the surface, yet God sees how slow separation can weaken joy, dull peace, and cloud discernment. Jesus understands how easy it is to normalize emotional heaviness, spiritual numbness, or constant distraction, because survival often demands attention while the soul quietly waits. God's warning is gentle but real, because danger does not always arrive loudly, and sometimes it grows quietly through neglect, delay, or avoidance. This message arrives as an act of care, inviting awareness before loss becomes deeper and healing becomes harder. Type 555. God knows how the heart can grow tired of trying, especially when prayers once spoken with hope seem to return unanswered or delayed. Jesus understands disappointment intimately, because he knows how unmet expectations can slowly shape belief and reduce trust. Yet God reminds you that silence is not abandonment, and waiting is not rejection, because timing shaped by love serves protection even when it feels confusing. This part of the message encourages you to revisit trust, not with pressure, but with openness that allows God's presence to feel near again. There is a quiet strength in listening, because listening creates space for wisdom to settle and clarity to rise. God does not speak to overwhelm you, but to steady you, guiding your steps with care that respects your pace. Jesus offers companionship rather than commands, walking beside you through uncertainty rather than standing above you with judgment. God's desire is not to control your life, but to guard your heart, because the heart directs everything that follows. Using a simple 7-second brain wave ritual, once classified and hidden in CIA files, can unlock wealth, freedom, and success already inside you. This discovery is helping thousands step into abundance, and God has led you here for a reason. Click the link in the description and comments below to awaken this money magnet frequency today. God has seen how certain influences slowly shaped your thinking, how repeated exposure softened boundaries you once held firmly, and how compromise felt easier than resistance when energy ran low. Jesus understands fatigue, and he does not shame weakness, but he does warn against remaining unguarded when the spirit is tired. This message carries a reminder that strength is renewed through connection, not isolation, and clarity returns when attention is redirected toward truth. God's guidance protects not by restricting freedom, but by preserving peace. There is healing in recognizing when something is pulling you away from what nourishes your spirit, because recognition opens the door to choice. God trusts you enough to speak honestly, because honesty honors your ability to respond with wisdom. Jesus believes in your capacity to realign, because he sees not only where you are, but where you can be when faith is allowed to breathe again. This part of the message invites reflection without shame, encouraging gentle adjustment rather than drastic fear. Type, yes, God's love remains steady even when correction is needed, because correction rooted in love restores rather than wounds. Jesus does not withdraw affection when warning is required, but draws closer, ensuring you feel supported rather than threatened. God speaks now to remind you that safety is not found in avoidance, denial, or distraction, but in awareness, humility, and connection. This message is meant to strengthen your inner resolve, helping you choose what protects your peace and nurtures your faith. God sees how the future can feel uncertain, especially when the present already feels heavy, yet he assures you that guidance reduces uncertainty and brings steadiness. Jesus offers peace that grows quietly, replacing anxiety with trust that unfolds gradually. God does not expect instant transformation, because lasting change grows through consistent, gentle steps guided by love. This part of the message affirms that every movement toward truth matters, even when it feels small. There is comfort in knowing that God's warnings come with solutions, His guidance comes with presence, and His love comes with patience. Jesus remains with you as you process, reflect, and realign, offering reassurance that you are not navigating this alone. God's voice stays calm and nurturing, reminding you that awareness leads to safety, and safety leads to peace. He has seen how you tried to reason your way through confusion, how you leaned on habits that once felt safe, and how your heart sometimes chose familiarity over truth simply to avoid more pain. Still, God did not withdraw, because His commitment to you is not weakened by hesitation or delayed obedience. God understands how subtle spiritual distance can be, because it rarely begins with rejection and often starts with exhaustion, disappointment, or the slow loss of wonder. Jesus knows how easily the heart can become tired of hoping when outcomes feel unclear, and how quickly prayer can become quiet when life feels overwhelming. This message speaks now because God desires to protect what remains tender within you, guarding it from becoming hardened by neglect or dulled by routine. His intention is not to alarm, but to realign your focus gently toward what sustains life rather than drains it. Type 2121. There is a deep kindness in how God approaches you here, because He knows confrontation without care wounds the soul, while truth wrapped in love restores it. Jesus does not stand at a distance pointing out faults, but walks close enough for you to feel His presence even while hearing His guidance. God sees how you have tried to balance many demands, how you learned to suppress emotions to stay functional, and how spiritual connection became something postponed rather than prioritized. This message invites you to notice that postponement slowly weakens spiritual strength, not because God pulls away, but because the heart forgets how to receive. God's warning is not about immediate disaster, but about gradual erosion of peace, clarity, and inner stability when the soul is left unattended for too long. Jesus desires to strengthen you before weariness becomes identity and before confusion feels permanent. God speaks now because restoration is easier when addressed early, and healing flows more freely when awareness is present. This part of the message carries an invitation to slow down internally, allowing truth to surface gently rather than forcing conclusions or reactions. God sees the good within you that remains unchanged, the compassion you still carry, and the faith that has not disappeared, only quieted. Jesus understands that faith does not vanish when it is not spoken, because it lives beneath the surface waiting to be nurtured again. God's presence continues to surround you, offering stability that does not depend on circumstances or emotional clarity. This message reassures you that returning your attention to God does not require dramatic change, only honest willingness and gentle openness. Type 333. God knows how fear sometimes shapes decisions, convincing the heart to choose what feels controlled rather than what feels true. Jesus speaks peace into that fear, reminding you that safety is found not in control, but in trust that grows through connection. God does not expect you to have everything figured out, because guidance unfolds as you walk, not before you begin. This part of the message encourages patience with the process, because growth shaped by love takes time and care. There is a quiet danger in allowing spiritual neglect to become normal, because what becomes normal often goes unnoticed until its absence is deeply felt. God speaks now to prevent that absence from growing, because He values your wholeness and desires your life to feel anchored rather than scattered. Jesus offers companionship that steadies the heart, helping you navigate uncertainty without losing direction. God's guidance does not remove challenges, but it equips you to face them with clarity and strength. A powerful 7-second morning ritual, once hidden in CIA files, is resurfacing, and people are already seeing fast financial breakthroughs. It takes only seconds, yet activates a dormant wealth center in the brain most people never access. Click the link in the description and comments now. Access it before it disappears. God has been present through every season, even those where you felt spiritually numb or emotionally drained. Jesus remained near during moments when faith felt heavy and prayer felt difficult, offering grace rather than judgment. This message reminds you that no season of distance has canceled God's care or reduced His involvement in your life. His love remains active, protective, and deeply invested in your well-being. God invites you to gently examine what has been shaping your attention, your energy, and your inner dialogue. Jesus encourages awareness, not to condemn, but to heal, because awareness opens the door to intentional change. God's desire is not to strip away comfort, but to replace false comfort with lasting peace. This part of the message supports that shift, reminding you that peace grows where truth is welcomed. As you continue receiving this message, allow your heart to remain receptive rather than defensive, because openness creates room for restoration. God's voice remains calm, patient, and sincere, offering guidance that leads toward life rather than loss. He has seen how certain patterns have repeated themselves, how familiar struggles returned even when you hoped they would fade, and how weariness sometimes made you accept less peace than you were created to carry. Still, God stayed close, because His commitment does not weaken when your strength feels thin. There are moments when the heart grows tired of resisting what feels easy, even when it quietly harms the soul, and God understands that exhaustion can blur discernment. Jesus knows how comfort can sometimes become a substitute for truth, and how distraction can feel like relief when pain has gone unhealed for too long. This message is not meant to accuse you of failure, but to remind you that you deserve more peace than survival mode offers, and more clarity than constant confusion provides. God speaks now because He desires to interrupt what drains you before it shapes your future too deeply. Type 777. God sees how you have adapted to pressure, how you learned to keep moving even when rest was needed, and how you carried spiritual hunger quietly without naming it. Jesus understands that naming need can feel vulnerable, especially when you have been strong for so long, yet vulnerability is often the doorway to healing. God's warning comes with gentleness, because He does not want fear to drive you, but awareness to guide you. This part of the message invites you to notice where your peace has thinned, where joy has become rare, and where faith has felt distant, not to shame you, but to protect you. There is a subtle danger in becoming used to emotional heaviness, because what becomes familiar often feels normal even when it is harmful. God speaks now to remind you that heaviness was never meant to be your permanent state, and numbness was never meant to be your shelter. Jesus offers peace that feels light but strong, steady but gentle, restoring what constant pressure slowly eroded. God's presence brings balance back to the heart, helping you recognize what needs attention before damage becomes deeper. God knows how easy it is to delay change, telling yourself there will be time later, or that things are not serious enough yet. Jesus understands that delay often feels safer than action, especially when action requires reflection, honesty, and surrender. Yet God reminds you that waiting too long can allow small struggles to grow quietly into heavier burdens. This message arrives as a loving interruption, inviting you to pause now rather than regret later. There is compassion in God's correction, because He corrects what He values and protects what He loves. Jesus does not correct to control, but to guide, because guidance preserves life and restores direction. God's words are meant to strengthen your inner awareness, helping you recognize when something is pulling you away from peace, clarity, and spiritual safety. This part of the message encourages you to choose attentiveness over autopilot, and reflection over avoidance. Type, "Yes, God sees how certain voices, environments, or habits have influenced your thinking, slowly shaping your emotions and expectations." Jesus understands that influence works quietly, often unnoticed, yet its impact can be powerful over time. God speaks now to remind you that guarding your heart is an act of wisdom, not fear, and that choosing what nourishes your spirit is an act of love toward yourself. This message supports your ability to make adjustments without panic, because gentle change guided by truth brings lasting peace. There is hope in knowing that awareness itself is already a step toward healing, because what is seen can be addressed and restored. God does not demand instant perfection, because transformation rooted in love unfolds gradually and sustainably. Jesus walks with you through that process, offering reassurance when doubt rises and strength when resolve feels weak. God's presence remains steady, even when your emotions fluctuate or your confidence wavers. God has not forgotten the promises He placed within your heart, the dreams shaped by compassion, and the faith that once felt alive and hopeful. Jesus knows those things are still there, waiting to be nurtured rather than buried under exhaustion or distraction. This message invites you to reconnect with what gives life rather than drains it, peace rather than pressure, and truth rather than comfort that fades quickly. God's desire is not to take from you, but to restore what has been quietly lost. He has seen how you kept moving forward even when peace felt thin, how you learned to live with tension as if it were normal, and how faith slowly became something you carried quietly instead of something you leaned on fully. Still, God remained close, because His love does not depend on your awareness of Him, but on His unchanging commitment to you. A simple but powerful 7-second at-home ritual, it's hidden in CIA files for years, is now changing lives rapidly. Backed by neuroscience research, it can begin shifting your financial direction in just days. Click the link in the description and comments now and step into abundance today. There are seasons when the heart grows weary of choosing what is right, especially when choosing right feels harder than choosing what feels familiar or easy. God understands that weariness, because He sees how often you have had to be strong without support, patient without reassurance, and steady without rest. Jesus knows how the soul can become tired of resisting patterns that promise relief but quietly drain strength over time. This message speaks now because God desires to protect you from continuing down paths that slowly dull joy and weaken spiritual clarity, even when those paths feel harmless on the surface. Type 888. God has noticed how moments of reflection became shorter, how silence felt uncomfortable, and how stillness was often replaced with noise, because noise helped you avoid feelings that felt too heavy to face. Jesus understands avoidance, not as rebellion, but as a sign of pain that has not yet been healed. God speaks gently but clearly here, because ignoring the inner world for too long allows wounds to deepen quietly. This part of the message invites you to pause internally, not to confront everything at once, but to acknowledge what has been asking for attention beneath the surface. There is a danger in living constantly distracted, because distraction can slowly disconnect the heart from wisdom, awareness, and peace. God does not warn to scare you, but to awaken you, because awakening brings choice, and choice brings change. Jesus offers presence that anchors the heart, helping you face what you once avoided without being overwhelmed by it. God's guidance does not demand immediate answers, but invites honest awareness, because honesty is the beginning of healing. God sees how your spirit has been stretched between responsibility and restlessness, between wanting stability and longing for something deeper that feels missing. Jesus understands that tension, because he knows the human heart was created for connection, meaning, and peace that goes beyond survival. This message is meant to remind you that restlessness is often a signal, not a failure, pointing toward a need that has gone unmet for too long. God listens to that signal and responds with care rather than judgment. There is comfort in knowing that God has not been counting how many times you hesitated, drifted, or delayed returning fully to Him. Jesus does not measure worth by consistency, but by the love He already holds for you. God's patience has allowed space for growth, reflection, and choice, because forced change rarely lasts, while invited change transforms deeply. This part of the message encourages you to trust that returning to God does not erase your past, but redeems it gently. God knows how fear sometimes disguises itself as logic, convincing you that staying guarded is safer than opening your heart again. Jesus speaks peace into that fear, reminding you that protection comes not from isolation, but from connection with truth and love. God does not ask you to abandon wisdom, but to let wisdom be guided by compassion rather than fear. This message supports a shift from self-protection toward God protection, which carries far less weight and far more peace. Type, yes, God sees how certain habits have become routines, and how routines slowly shape identity when left unexamined. Jesus understands that habits often form not from desire, but from coping, and He approaches them with grace rather than condemnation. God speaks now to remind you that awareness gives you power, and power gives you choice, even when change feels intimidating. This part of the message invites gentle evaluation rather than harsh judgment, because healing grows best in kindness. There is hope in realizing that nothing you have experienced has disqualified you from God's care or reduced His willingness to guide you. Jesus remains present even when you feel unsure how to move forward, offering clarity one step at a time. God does not reveal everything at once, because trust grows through walking, not through knowing everything in advance. This message reassures you that uncertainty does not mean abandonment, and confusion does not mean failure. God has seen moments when you longed for reassurance, for a sign that you were not alone or off track, even if you did not voice that longing aloud. Jesus meets that longing with presence rather than spectacle, offering peace that settles slowly rather than excitement that fades quickly. God's love works quietly, deeply, and consistently, reshaping the heart in ways that last. This part of the message reminds you that true safety is found not in avoiding struggle, but in being guided through it. As you continue receiving these words, allow them to settle without resistance or pressure, because God is not rushing you, but He is reaching you. His voice remains calm, protective, and sincere, offering direction without force and care without condition. He has observed how the rhythm of your days changed, how spiritual awareness softened, and how inner resistance grew whenever stillness invited reflection. None of this surprised God, because He understands the human heart and knows how easily it grows tired when life keeps demanding more without offering rest. Still, His care did not lessen, and His attention never shifted away from you. There were moments when you sensed a quiet inner warning, not loud or dramatic, but persistent enough to make you pause, and yet you continued forward because stopping felt inconvenient or uncomfortable. Jesus understands that discomfort often feels threatening when the heart is already carrying weight, yet He also knows that ignoring gentle warnings can slowly lead the soul toward deeper unrest. God speaks now not to accuse you of wrongdoing, but to protect you from continuing down paths that quietly steal peace, clarity, and spiritual strength. This message arrives as a safeguard, not a sentence, because God's desire has always been to preserve life, not to instill fear. Type 999. God knows how easy it is to confuse familiarity with safety, even when what feels familiar no longer nourishes the spirit. Jesus understands how habits formed in survival can remain long after survival is no longer needed, shaping choices in ways the heart does not always notice. God's warning comes with compassion, because He sees the long-term impact of what you normalize today. This part of the message invites you to gently examine what has become routine, not with guilt, but with honesty that opens the door to healing. What if wealth was never about luck, but a hidden brain signal buried in CIA files? This frequency is opening doors, attracting opportunities, and changing lives quickly. Thousands are already using it to attract wealth like never before. Click the link in the description and comments now and activate the money-attracting brain wave today. There is a quiet danger in ignoring the inner voice that calls you back toward truth, because that voice grows softer when repeatedly dismissed. God speaks now because He desires that voice to remain clear, guiding you with wisdom rather than allowing confusion to deepen. Jesus offers clarity that does not overwhelm, but steadies the heart and sharpens discernment over time. God's guidance protects you from choices that feel small now but could carry heavy weight later. God sees how you have tried to manage everything internally, believing that strength meant handling struggles alone. Jesus understands that belief, because the world often praises self-reliance while overlooking the cost it places on the soul. God gently reminds you that carrying everything alone was never the design, because connection brings renewal that isolation cannot provide. This message encourages you to lean toward support rather than retreat further inward, because healing flows more freely through openness. There is compassion in God's correction, because correction offered early prevents deeper pain later. Jesus does not wait until damage becomes obvious, because His care looks ahead with wisdom shaped by love. God's words here are meant to help you adjust direction before exhaustion becomes identity and restlessness becomes permanent. This part of the message reassures you that awareness now can prevent regret later. God knows how fear sometimes whispers that change will be harder than staying the same, even when staying the same quietly harms the heart. Jesus counters that fear with reassurance, reminding you that change guided by love unfolds gently rather than abruptly. God does not expect immediate transformation, because sustainable growth happens through consistent, intentional steps rather than dramatic shifts. This message supports patience with the process, because God values lasting peace over quick fixes. Type, yes, God has seen how spiritual connection became something postponed, something saved for later, because life always seemed to demand attention first. Jesus understands delay, yet he also knows that postponing connection slowly weakens spiritual resilience. God speaks now to remind you that connection is not an extra, but a foundation that supports everything else. This part of the message invites you to reconsider what you prioritize, not out of obligation, but out of care for your own well-being. There is hope in knowing that nothing has gone too far, nothing has been missed beyond repair, and nothing has disqualified you from God's guidance. Jesus remains present, offering direction even when you feel uncertain how to begin again. God's love does not depend on your confidence, but on His faithfulness, which remains steady through every season. This message reassures you that returning your attention to God restores clarity that confusion cannot erase. God understands the complexity of your thoughts, the internal debates between comfort and conviction, and the hesitation that rises when change feels unknown. Jesus meets you in that complexity, offering peace that does not demand certainty, only trust that grows gradually. God does not rush your response, but He does invite reflection, because reflection creates space for wisdom to surface. This part of the message encourages you to slow your inner pace, allowing truth to settle naturally rather than forcing conclusions. There is safety in listening now, because listening opens the heart to guidance that protects rather than restricts. God's desire is not to limit your life, but to guard it, ensuring that what lies ahead is shaped by peace rather than regret. Jesus walks beside you through this awareness, offering reassurance that you are not alone as you realign your steps. God's care remains active, attentive, and deeply personal, watching over you with patience that has not faded. As this message continues, allow yourself to remain receptive rather than defensive, because God's voice comes from love that has never stopped caring. His warning is gentle, His guidance is steady, and His presence remains close. There were times when you felt a subtle tension inside, a sense that something was not fully aligned, yet you moved forward anyway because stopping felt uncomfortable or inconvenient. Jesus understands that discomfort often feels like a threat when the heart has already endured much, yet He also knows that ignoring inner tension can slowly pull the soul away from peace. God speaks now because He desires to guide you gently back toward balance before restlessness becomes permanent. This message is not meant to unsettle you, but to steady you, because awareness creates safety and reflection creates clarity. Type 1111. God knows how easily the heart can grow accustomed to living slightly disconnected, telling itself that everything is manageable while quietly feeling drained. Jesus understands how survival can replace joy when life feels demanding, and how faith can become background noise rather than a living connection. God's voice here is a reminder that you were created for more than endurance, more than coping, and more than constant strain. This part of the message invites you to remember that peace is not a luxury, but a sign of alignment with the life God desires for you. There is a quiet danger in ignoring the need for spiritual nourishment, because what is neglected slowly weakens, even when it appears fine on the surface. God does not warn to instill fear, but to prevent loss that does not need to happen. Jesus offers guidance that strengthens discernment, helping you recognize when something is draining you rather than sustaining you. This message encourages gentle honesty with yourself, because honesty opens the door to restoration without shame. A 7-second at-home ritual, scientifically proven by neuroscience labs and hidden for decades in CIA files, is now public, and people are seeing money flow into their lives. Scientists say it activates a brain pathway linked to abundance. Click the link in the comments below before this knowledge disappears again. God sees how you have learned to carry emotional weight silently, believing that strength meant not needing help or guidance. Jesus understands that belief, because the world often celebrates independence while overlooking its cost. God gently reminds you that true strength includes knowing when to lean, when to listen, and when to allow support to enter. This part of the message reassures you that leaning toward God does not diminish you, but restores what constant effort has worn thin. There is compassion in how God invites reflection rather than forcing change, because forced change rarely lasts, while invited change transforms deeply. Jesus walks beside you in this process, offering presence rather than pressure, because presence builds trust. God's care is patient enough to wait, yet intentional enough to speak before harm grows. This message holds both patience and urgency in balance, guiding rather than pushing, protecting rather than controlling.